So he kills not one, not two, but three Gibelream giants single-handedly in combat. And the other hunting party hears the screams and comes to run to see what's going on.
Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech, as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
Hey, today we're going to talk about the Bible and we're going to talk about Bigfoot. We're probably going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff too, but those are kind of on the docket for today. And also on the docket is Doc Brown. Welcome to Paranoid American Podcast. Long overdue. I know that we've run across the past a few times on other podcasts, but finally it's just me and you, so I can ask all the crazy questions that I got about this book that you wrote about Esau. So first, introduce yourself and then let people know where to find you. Do all the plugs up front here.
Hey, man. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, and like you said, we followed each other on socials and stuff for a while, and we run around in the same circle, so it was just a matter of time of hooking up. But I thank you for having me over. But yeah, I got the Prometheus Lens podcast, and anywhere you can consume content, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all those fine establishments, you can find me there. But yeah, if you're into, Paranoid American, conspiracy, and ancient lost civilizations, cryptids, all those fascinating subjects, that's kind of the stuff that I cover, but I kind of put it through a biblical lens. And yeah, that's just kind of the stuff that I've been deep diving and looking into, man.
I gotta ask, what Bible out of the 40,000 flavors? What's the one that you reach to when you're gonna decode something or just read scripture?
Man, there is no perfect translation, but I like the ESV. It's kind of a good mixture of a literal and modern interpretation. But if I'm going to tear something apart, I'm a big fan of Logos Bible software. You can get on there and look at everything lined up, compare different verses, and they got interlinears, so you can look at the Hebrew and the Greek. But the main three that I kind of go through when I'm trying to pick something apart, I look at the ESV, the KJV, and then I like the NASB.
All right, yeah, that's actually a really good suggestion. I know that there was a version of the printed Bible before internet got big enough to where you could just go there and get software to do it, of the companion Bible. And the companion Bible would do something similar where it would show you an a modern English translation. And then for certain passages that were highly contested or somewhat vague, it would have 4 or 5 different iterations of this, kind of proven to the point that there's not just this one version that's got all the perfect translations. So with some of like the housekeeping out of the way on that, you wrote this book called The Epic of Esau. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Esau?
I don't know if I pronounce it right. I'm a Southern man. I can barely speak English, brother, but I always say Esau.
Esau. So in Esau, my only real understanding of Esau is the regular biblical story, which was about a guy that didn't respect what he had. He didn't respect his birthright, and he traded it for a bowl of soup or something like this. But then also, I've heard him referred to as the biblical Bigfoot because he was the son of Isaac, I believe, and his name literally translates to hairy, like he was a hairy baby. And even the first mention that he gets in the Bible, regardless of what version you're reading from, they pretty much all amount to saying that he was the firstborn son and he had a body full of hair. It looked like a coat of red fur. And so this is one of the names that comes up constantly whenever the biblical case for Bigfoot comes up. But I admittedly don't know a whole lot more than those two simple sort of facts. So I'm excited to learn more about Esau from you. First of all, why out of all the different names in the Bible, what attracted you to this name out of all of them?
Honestly, it was just kind of like a catty joke between friends. And you had a deeper understanding of Esau than I did. And I grew up in the church, but I was a good old Southern Baptist boy. I just, heard that, I did see the part where it said, he was hairy, but they just kind of downplayed it. They were like, he just, was a hairy guy. He had hairy arms and a good full beard, and that's all that was. And he was very carnal, and he thought about the now and the pleasures of now and didn't think of the future and cared nothing for his inheritance and traded it away for the pleasures of the moment. He was just hungry and traded it away. And that was it. That's all I knew. I didn't know nothing about, a Sasquatch connection or any of that kind of stuff. And I've never been a Bigfoot enthusiast, but, I knew the general stuff. I knew that there was a Bigfoot sighting by a bunch of guys out in California that were cutting down trees, and a story kind of made the newspaper, and the Patterson-Gimlin film, and people that had experiences. I just kind of had the 30,000 foot view of Bigfoot. And I had a couple of friends that were like just straight up enthusiasts. They listened to all the podcasts and knew all the information behind it. And the first podcast that I'd ever done, which I still do, it's like a Bible study with my friends called the Dig Bible podcast. And we had Trey Smith from God in a Nutshell on the show. And we were talking, and he made a comment. He was like, "Oh, you guys are from East Tennessee. That's Bigfoot country. Maybe next time I'm out that way, I'll give you guys a call, and we'll hang out, and we'll go Bigfoot hunting." And like I said, I mean, I knew the story of Esau, read it, and just never thought nothing about it. And it was just like out of nowhere, something just hit me in the head and was like, "Hey, man, Genesis 25:25, Esau." And then I kind of recited the verse in my head. He'd come out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. And I was like, holy shit, that's a Bigfoot. Yeah. So then I said, hey, man, Genesis 25:25, Esau, what do you think about that? You think he was the first Bigfoot seed, or at least the first documented one? And Trey kind of chuckled. He's like, he was a hairy dude, wasn't he? Yeah, you might be onto something. And we just kind of let it go at that. And I had just started my second show, the Prometheus Lens, and I was having Gary Wayne on to talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh. And once again, that was something I knew, the general outline, but as I started reading it, I bumped into this character named Enkidu. And it sounded just like Esau. And I was like, man, here's another one of these hairy dudes. And it was just like one little thing after the other kept stacking up. And then I read the book of Jasher for studying for something else. And then I saw for the first time that this hairy guy bumps into Nimrod and they have a fight to the death. And I was like, dude, this sounds like a mirrored image of the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So I just started finding all these little breadcrumbs. And I did a show with Bo Kennedy from the Bump podcast and was just kind of talking about Esau, how he kind of sounds like what we would call a Sasquatch today. And I talked about the book of Jasher and that encounter with Nimrod. And that was in November, I think, of last year or maybe year before.
Year before, yeah, because we're in 2025 now.
Yeah. And so it only had a couple months in that year. And the response was just insane. I had all kinds of people emailing me and direct messaging me. And it's like, dude, this is awesome. You should write a book. And then come January, Bo reached out to me. He's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. He said, I'm not bragging, but I got a pretty good following. I've been doing this a while. He said, and your show got into the top 5 in my Wrapped for the year on Spotify. He said, you only had 2 months on the air, but it broke into the top 5. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. So it just wound up to me just taking all my little notes and stuff that I compiled and just started writing a book, man.
I'm excited to hear some of the kind of like things that you've uncovered in the last year and a half of going through all this. And you said that even when you were kind of going through just regular Bible study growing up, that you didn't hear a lot about Esau. But the main reason that Esau sort of stuck with me is because the story never really made sense. Like, first, I guess I would like to get your read on the actual story because the full story, I'm not going to read the scripture, I'm going to paraphrase it from what I remember. But Esau, the premise was that, like you said, that he was living for the short term. He didn't think long, big picture kind of thing. He wasn't thinking 5 days into the future. He was barely thinking 5 minutes into the future. And this sort of showed itself that he comes back from the field working and he kind of calls it starving. I wonder, like, was he just really, really hungry or was he legitimately starving? But they kind of make it sound like he's starving. And he comes up on his brother and his brother is making this lentil soup. They call it like red soup and I always wondered I wonder if that red is something else too because of the red hair. Anyways, his brother is making this stew. And Esau is famished, and he's like, hey, let me get a cup of that soup. And his brother basically says, well, maybe if you give me your birthright. So really, it almost feels like like Esau's brother, seems that he has less honor in some way because he suggested that Esau give him something which was kind of unspeakable. And maybe he knew that Esau was sort of short-sighted. Maybe he realized that Esau was so hungry that he wasn't thinking logically, but he's the one that kind of offered this horrible deal, and then Esau takes it, and Esau is sort of now, looked down upon. That, like, the whole story of Esau is don't be like that guy, right? Don't trade your birthright, and I guess meaning all of his inheritance, everything that you would get for being the firstborn son, he just gives that all up to his younger brother. So now his younger brother gets to be the firstborn. But I guess I always wonder, wasn't his younger brother just as much of a dick or even maybe more so than Esau was?
Yeah, I mean, it makes him out to be the wicked trickster kind of brother. And with me, I love, Greek history and mythology. After looking at that in my older years, I kind of see that and see some parallels with Prometheus and the long lost brother that doesn't get much attention, but Epimetheus. Prometheus means before thought, to actually think of stuff and actions before you do them. And Epimetheus means afterthought. It means you just do what you want without any kind of thought of tomorrow. And that was kind of like Esau. But like you, when I read that, I was like, this story doesn't make sense. We're missing something, because the birthright, I mean, in modern terms, is like, your father is Donald Trump. You're the firstborn son. You're about to inherit millions of dollars in the business. You're a made man, as the mafia says, and you're going to trade it all away for food, and not even good food, red lentil stew.
Right, yeah, it's among the cheapest of all of the foods that he could have traded it for. This was like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and he was known as the mighty hunter. He had the same claim to fame as Nimrod. This guy could have went out and had his choice of lion steak or whatever the hell he wanted. He was a masterful hunter. And the wording is that he came in from the field exhausted. And he's like, then he says, what use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. And then you can hear the urgency in Jacob's voice. He's like, trade me your birthright. Promise me you'll do this thing now. Trade me now. And as I was reading it, I was like, gosh, And then I even kind of quoted it on the cover of the book. It says, right here it says, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And this is from the Lord. And, it says that, God's a God of love. But Esau, he hated? I mean, that's pretty harsh. And so as I got to looking through there, it says that, he was unmoral and sexually immoral and all this stuff too. And I'm like, what am I missing here? I mean, there's something missing. And it wasn't until I started going through the extra biblical books, the Midrash and the Targums, and then I stumbled into Louis Ginsburg and his Legends of the Jews. And that's a 9-book series where this guy compiled all the legends and lore and mythology of the Jewish people. And there's so much that's, interwoven into these stories that's not in the quote-unquote canon. And I'm a big fan of Michael Heiser. He tells you something doesn't have to be divine inspired to be important for historical and cultural contexts. And this is one of those stories, Esau, where you just get a blurb about him and then they move on because they assume that you already know the story. Because the writers of this time, this is an ancient text. They wasn't thinking thousands of years in advance about us in our modern context reading these books and being kind of left out on the stories and the history. And they also had all these extra biblical books floating around that everybody was read and were well familiar with in the oral traditions. I think what we have here with Esau is very similar to the Genesis 6 narrative. To us, that's a pretty big deal. The angelic race, the sons of God came down and bred with the daughters of men and made Nephilim giants. And that's all you get. It just says, there was Nephilim on the earth in those days, and the
no
sons of
deal.
God came down.
Yeah.
And then, okay, move right along. And just a verse or two or chapter 2 later, you get the flood and the destruction of earth and all humanity. And it's like, whoa, what happened there? I want some more context. But you have the book of Enoch, and that's why. The writer was like, we have well-established oral traditions. Everybody knows about the sons of God breeding with the daughters of men and the giants and what they done. And then they had the book of Enoch, I believe. So same thing with this Esau character, in my opinion, was they was like, we don't have to go deep into this. Everybody knows. But no, we don't.
That's kind of mind-blowing too when you see that. Say like the book of Numbers gets included in the Bible, and that's just the word begat like 1,000 times in a row, right? Like they could have maybe left out some begats and thrown in a little bit of extra context on Genesis 1:6 or some of the stuff about Esau. So for Esau, what am I missing? Like I guess you got my impression. It sounds like you got the same first one too, that Esau's got all this hate, like God hates him, and his brother rips him off for soup, and he's a great hunter at the level of Nimrod, who was also one of the greatest hunters of all time, historically. So why is this dude trading everything that he's got coming to him for a bowl of bean soup when, like you said, he could be eating lion steak if he really wanted to?
Yeah. And that was something that's like, once I got to digging into this, and I told you that I seen the parallels with the Epic of Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh, a lot of historians align him with Nimrod. So it's not a far stretch to make those correlations. But when I read the book of Jasher, that tied in the loose ends for me. And when you get to the book of Jasher, I think it's chapter 27, you have the story of Esau and Jacob, And it says, in the Genesis narrative, remember it just said that he come in from the field one day and he was exhausted and traded the birthright. Well, Jasher gives you all the backstory. And it says that he was alive during the time of Nimrod. And their claims to fame were that they were mighty hunters. And it's kind of like the Highlander. There can only be one, baby. And it's like they were after each other. And it words it like Nimrod is hunting Esau, this quote-unquote hairy man, this hairy beast of a man. And it says that hatred and jealousy had built up in the heart of Nimrod all of his days after Esau. And that him and a group of people went into the wilderness to hunt this man. And it's kind of like the Beauty and the Beast trope. And you have Gaston. He was the mighty hunter, and he was going to kill this wild beast and, mount him on the wall kind of thing. And it says that Nimrod goes into the wilderness hunting for Esau, and he has a group of people with him like a hunting party, but they separate, and it says that him and two of his Gibborim, which, in Hebrew, translates and correlates to the Nephilim giants. This is the same word used to describe the Nephilim giants, the mighty men of old, the Gibborim. So it makes, and all the depictions you have in history of Nimrod, he's holding this, in Gilgamesh, he's holding this lion like it's a little kitty cat. He was a giant. And I've even heard people say, oh, well, that was probably a lion cub. And I'm like, if you look at that carving in those depictions, it's got a full mane. This is a full-grown lion.
Right, but also, it doesn't seem like you're paying as much veneration to someone by etching them holding a little lion cub, right? Yeah, holding a little kitty cat. Like, that's, if it's supposed to convey the power and the prowess and being a great hunter, it would have to be a full-size lion. It can't be a lion cub. That wouldn't make any sense either.
Yeah. So basically you have, these three giants hunting this hairy beast of a man in the field. And even in the legends, it says that Nimrod was, or Gilgamesh was 2/3 God. And what's crazy is when you go into like the Sumerian kings list, it says that his father was Lilu. And when you look up who Lilu was, it was like a god demon, but it was like of the vampiristic kind. So it's kind of like you have this Gibborim giant vampire type guy with two of his giant friends hunting this Sasquatch looking guy. I mean, this is something that sounds like it's straight out of a Marvel movie or a comic book. But as they're looking and searching for this guy, it says that Esau sees him and that he hides himself in the bush, basically, and in the woods. And he springs forward and surprises them. And it says that he cuts off Nimrod's head with his sword and then fights these other two Gibborim and slays them. So he kills not one, not two, but three Gibborim giants single-handedly in combat. And the other hunting party hears the screams and comes to run to see what's going on. And it says that Nimrod takes the time it says that Esau took the time to remove Nimrod's garments. And it says that these were the garments that gave Nimrod the power to rule over all the peoples. And that he stole these garments and rushes back home. And it says that he hides the garments in his house and then goes to the house of his father and finds Jacob there cooking this red lentil stew. And here's where Genesis picks up. He sure was exhausted from the field because he just battled three giants to the death. He's just killed the king. He's on the run. Probably sustained some life-threatening injuries from this exchange. So this is kind of like allegorically, it's not just food. He's like, nourish me, bandage my wounds, hide me. And that explains his urgency too, and why he says, what use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. I'm about to die. So,
and this is because he killed the king. He killed Nimrod, and that's why he's about to die, because the whole world essentially is coming after him, right?
Yeah, and he probably sustained some life-threatening injuries too, and he wanted his brother to patch him up and to hide him. And you had mentioned that, Stu. There's some significance with that too when you look through these ancient texts and the legends and the culture of the people. It throws in there at the beginning of that story in Genesis that this was during the time of the death of Abraham. Well, in their culture, the firstborn son was supposed to get the birthright. He had the priesthood and authority position of the household, and he had certain responsibilities. And with that culture, the firstborn son, during the passing of his elder or grandfather, he was to prepare a red lentil stew as a sign of mourning and present it to his father. So it's lost to us because of our context. We've lost that. But here's Jacob, the secondborn, and he is performing the duties of the firstborn, while Esau's out gallivanting about and fighting, for pride and for glory, and so he comes in, and that's why Jacob's kind of like, of course he wants the birthright and all the privileges that go with it, but he was kind of like, this is your responsibility. You should be doing this, but no, I'm taking care of your responsibilities. So just go ahead and just trade me the birthright.
I can just imagine Esau like, okay, you go and hunt Nimrod, and I'll sit here and make soup. If that's what sounds like the fair trade, right?
Right. And so when I followed that story, and I was like, well, these garments, what's so special about these garments? Was it just some kind of kingly robe, that was like a trophy for him? And then you keep on reading, and it says that these garments were the garments given to Adam and Eve in the garden as their coverings when they were kicked out of the garden. And it explains that this was the birthright, these garments. This was the sign of priesthood and kingship and authority, and that it passed down the line to the eldest son as a birthright. So like I'm a Southern guy, so, with my, Southern context, the most similar thing that I can think of is like your grandmother's quilted blanket.
Or grandpa's Winchester or something.
Yeah, it's just something that was a family heirloom that got passed down the line. And it follows these garments. It goes from Adam and on down the line, just like it's supposed to Enoch, to Methuselah, to Noah. And it says that Noah has the garments and carries them through the flood. But it says that in Ham's going out, Ham stole the garments and then gives them to Cush. And Cush keeps them in secret until he has Nimrod. And it says that Nimrod was the child of his old age, and whom he loved exceedingly. And that at 20 years old, when he was coming of age, he was given the garments, and he put on the garments. And it said that when he placed on the garments, he became a mighty man, a mighty hunter of the field. And to me, that answered the very ambiguous question that people always have, because when they're reading the book of Genesis, it says that it doesn't just come right out and say that Nimrod was a Gibborim. It says that he became a Gibborim. So it's like attributing these supernatural garments from the garden of God to what makes him a Gibborim.
I just have to start speculating now, and I'm sure all these thoughts probably have gone through your head already reading on this book, but I'm just wondering, could garments mean like a material physical body, and that all of these other Nimrod at this point is just like an ethereal entity, and being given garments is like being able to manifest in a physical form on the planet? Or like the garment, how could a garment take you from being a normal person into being a Nephilim giant? Or am I thinking about it all wrong?
Well, that was the thought of the people of that time. And when you go through, of course, I think it's multifaceted. You know, do I think it was just the garments? No. And were these garments really supernatural with power? I mean, that's debatable. But one thing you can't debate is that's what they believed. And it wasn't out of the norm for the biblical narrative. You have many supernaturally charged relics and objects. You had the Ark of the Covenant. You had Moses' rod. And you had these garments. And so when I was reading that, I was like, well, gosh, I need to go back to Genesis and read this account and go through some of these traditions and see, you know, what's up with these garments. And when I went back and read the account, it says that, you know, you had the fall of man, and that they were given these, you know, according to what translation you read, but it says that they were given garments of skin. But when you go into the Hebrew, it says that they were given that God hilbished, that was the Hebrew word, God hilbished their nakedness with a kanonet. And hilbish, you know, is to cover, and kanonet many times, especially like in the book of Exodus and stuff, that word is translated as like a tunic. They were given a tunic to cover their nakedness. And when I started going through, I found that this was the exact same phrase used for the garments that covered the priests. Their priestly ephod was specifically given to them because it hilbished their nakedness with a kanonet. And I was like, okay, it's just like some priestly stuff and priestly language. And then I stumbled across Ezekiel 28. And in Ezekiel 28 is a condemnation to the king of Tyre. But halfway through, the verbiage changes, and he's no longer talking to a king. He's obviously talking to a supernatural entity, because all of a sudden it starts talking to Satan. And that's the scholarly opinion. I mean, there's not much debate on that. I mean, it's kind of universal. Everybody thinks that this is Satan, because it says, you were once in the Garden of Eden. Every precious stone was your covering. It says diamond, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper, and it names these 9 stones. But when you go to the Septuagint, it names 12 stones. And it says, you were perfect the day you were created, and it talks about this, you know, garment, and it had gold inlays and settings and all this stuff. And I was like, this sounds exactly, I mean, to the T of the priestly ephod. And then later in that same chapter, it says that, you know, he was thrown from the mountain of God as a profane thing, you know, and that he even walked amongst the stones of fire, and he profaned his sanctuaries. And I was like, they're painting Satan in a priestly role. He has a priestly ephod, he walked amongst the stones of fire, and he profaned his sanctuaries. And so once I had that context, I went back to Genesis and got to looking at it, and I kind of come up with this theory, you know. I was like, what if Satan tried to, you know, if you look at it as a family aspect, you know, the angelic race is the elder brother, humanity is the younger brother, and he tried to deceive his younger brother and cause his fall. But as his punishment, he got the reverse. And his priestly garments were taken from him and given to Adam, humanity. And when you go into the rabbinic traditions, all the rabbis say that Adam was the first king and priest of all creation. And I think that's when he got that bestowed upon him. Satan was demoted, and his priestly garments were taken from him, and the priesthood and kingship and dominion was given to Adam, mankind. And it's pretty wild, and I thought that I'd just come up with this, but once I started going through the old Jewish literature and stuff, that's what they thought too. And it talks about in Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews, it says that the coverings given to Adam and Eve was the skins of the Nakash, the coverings of the Nakash. And in Hebrew, that's serpent, for those that don't know. And that word Nakash, it can mean serpent, but just like in the Hebrew language, one word can have multiple meanings, so you got to insert the different meanings with the context to see which fits better. But some of the other meanings is one who practices divination, or the shining one. And then immediately I was like, what makes more sense? A talking snake that caused the fall of humanity, or a shining one who practices divination that was a member of God's divine council and rebelled against God and creation? And then when you look at the description of the garments, all these multicolored stones and gold inlays, and even his garment describes his name. He definitely would be shining with this priestly ephod on. And it makes total sense that this was the passing of the birthright. This was the status symbol of kingship and authority. And it was that, you remember that movie Noah, 2014?
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky. It was based on a comic book series.
Well, when I first watched that, I was like, dude, they got this totally wrong,
Not a lot of people
giants.
like it the first time they see it, but after you see it like 10 times, then you're like, oh, they're onto something.
Well, after I started researching this stuff and getting into the mindset of the ancient Jewish people and their legends and lore and all that, it kind of hit me as I was researching this book, and I was like, holy shit, these garments are in this movie. If you remember when it starts off and he's talking about creation in the Garden of Eden with his kids on the boat, it shows Adam and Eve as these like glowing light beings walking hand in hand in the garden. And then this serpent slithers up and it opens its mouth, and then he sheds his skin and crawls out of it. And then he leaves behind this glowing, gold shimmering skin. And Adam walks over and it shows him pick it up. And then in that movie, King Og ends up with it. And it's kind of like the crown. It is the status symbol, the signet ring. It's the symbol of authority and kingship. And he would wear it like wrapped around his arm or like in this little pouch on his neck. And in that movie, Og sneaks onto the boat. And Ham discovers him down there. And he keeps it a secret, you remember? And he was bringing him food and stuff. And he's like, in the movie, he's fascinated with this snake skin. He's staring at it all the time. And then at one point, he even tries to like take it from Og while he thinks he's sleeping. And Og wakes up and grabs him. And he's like, this is for a man, and you're not a man yet. And then like later on in the film, Noah discovers him. There's this great battle. And Ham walks up and stabs Og in the back. And if you remember, Og turns around and he grabs him. He's like coughing up blood and stuff. And he was like, now you're a man. And he hands him the snakeskin. And that goes directly in line with this, what I've been studying. I was like, Ham steals the garments in his going out, according to the book of Jasher. But then it shows Ham looking on the drunkenness of his father, and he throws this bag at him and on the ground. That was the snakeskin. So he rejected, in the film, he rejected his birthright. And then at the end of the film, you see Russell Crowe taking that snakeskin, he's wrapping it around his arm. And he says it outright, he says, this was the birthright of Adam, given to him. And he said, and the commandments were given to be fruitful and to multiply. He said, now I pass this birthright to the next generation. And they're sitting there, and there's two of them holding those babies. And he takes that snake skin and with the head of it wrapped around his finger, and he touches the forehead of the babies, and it lights up and glows. So it was amazing. You know, they always say hindsight's 20/20, but after I had discovered these things and remembered that film and watched it again, I was like, holy shit, the writer of this film had read these other legends and lore and extra biblical books and kind of weaved that in for like an Easter egg that 90% of the population that's never read these, you know, books and these legends and stuff would pick up on.
Well, one of Darren Aronofsky's first movies too was the movie Pi. That if you're only paying attention to 90% of it, it's about a guy that's trying to sort of reverse engineer the stock market, or he's trying to find some like magic mathematical formula that will always predict where a stock's going to be. Or you can extrapolate that to almost mean anything, almost like a source code of the earth. But towards the end of the movie, it just starts going deep into Kabbalah, and it gets into gematria, and they're talking about the tree of life and the mother and the father and what all of these add up to in Hebrew letters and numbers, and the math is working out to like square roots and all this stuff. So it's definitely in the wheelhouse of an Aronofsky film. And you just kind of blew my mind a little bit, because one of the biblical fascinations that I have for all sorts of reasons is that very controversial Ham in the tent. Like, what did Ham see in that tent that caused him to get kicked off of the ark, and for all of his family to be cursed forever and ever, right? The curse of Ham.
It's a big deal.
And I guess you threw in a detail, and I assume that this is from the Noah movie, that not only does Ham go into the tent with Noah, but you said he throws his birthright at him. He's throwing the snake skin, these garments that will make you the king. So maybe that's the ultimate sin. Is that the thing that he did that caused him to be kicked off the ark and all of his relatives kicked off the ark forever, was because he was denying this birthright?
I'm about to really blow your mind now.
Please, man. This is like one of my like go-tos on like biblical questions.
Yeah, and I talk about it in the book. And because those garments, the passing of it and the rejecting is kind of interwoven with this. But just like we talked about, there's so many stories in the Bible that when you read, you're like, God, I don't get that, or God, that's harsh. I don't get it. And that was another one. And it wasn't until I looked into the traditions of the ancient people and got the proper context to understand that, and it made so much more sense. Okay, in that story, you know, modern context, the way that I was taught, you know, you've been at school all day and your dad gets drunk, passes out naked, and you come home, boom, there he is laying naked, and you and your entire family for all generations are cursed forever. That's harsh. I wasn't the one that got drunk and passed out nude. Even if I stopped to poke fun and make fun of you, that's still pretty harsh, I think. But when you get into the verbiage of that story, it says that he uncovered his father's nakedness. Well, when you go to the book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, I think it's Leviticus 17, it says, to uncover thy father's nakedness is to sleep with thy father's wife. And I was like, okay. And you go on in there, it says, your father's nakedness is his wife's. You shall not lay with your father's wife and uncover her nakedness, because it is your father's nakedness. And then when you look for other like cultural contexts and similarities, it shows you that sleeping with your father's wife was an act of dominance and rebellion in the ancient world. Absalom, he overthrows his father David and runs David out of the kingdom. Well, the first thing he does is he goes on the roof of his father's house and pitches a tent and goes into all of his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel to show that he was the man now.
To be fair, that is the ultimate alpha move.
Yeah. And Reuben was the eldest, but Joseph got all the favor. So he ends up sleeping with his father's concubine. So this was a very common practice of rebellion and dominance in the ancient world. So Ham didn't just come in and uncover his father's nakedness and look at him naked. He slept with his mother and tried to take over the family. And it makes perfect sense that the cursing was so harsh now, because if you look at all the cursings in the Bible from God, it's always correlated with the crime, and it's usually the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. So in that story, he was trying to take over the household and be the head of the household, but he got the opposite, because the cursing said, a servant to thy brothers ye shall be. And then when I seen it in that context, I was like, okay. But then it says, cursed be Canaan, not Ham. Cursed be Canaan. Well, Canaan was Ham's firstborn son. And if you're reading that chronologically, Canaan wasn't even born yet. And a lot of times we read these stories and we think all this stuff just happens, linear, like if this was all in one day or something. It doesn't say that. It just says that when Noah recovered from his drunkenness, so this could have been several months down the road, like once he just finally decided to get off the wagon and start going to AA, And so I took the context of that and I started reading, and when it talks about Canaan, it says that a servant to thy brothers ye shall be to Shem and Japheth. And I was like, Shem and Japheth is not his brothers. That's his uncles. I was like, he can't be his brothers. And I was like, holy shit. Unless when Ham slept with his mother, she got pregnant. And that was the birth of Canaan.
Interesting.
So,
I haven't heard that. I've heard interpretations where Ham and Canaan were basically the same person. That's a fairly mainstream version of this one as well, I think.
But yeah, so, whether his mother was a willing participant or she was raped, it doesn't say. But he slept with his mother and she got pregnant. And the result of that incestuous union was Canaan. And once he realized that his wife was pregnant, it wasn't his, and that they named it Canaan, and he said, that's why he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant to thy brothers ye shall be. And at this point is the fracture of the family, and Ham leaves. But before he leaves, he steals that birthright. But in that story, too, we see those garments, even in the canonical books, I believe. Because in that story, and here I even say this in the book, it's kind of like my creative spin to it. But he goes in and does the deed. He comes outside and he tells his brothers, basically, hey, Dad's a drunk. He's been depressed ever since the flood. He just drinks and passes out. He's unfit to rule. We're doing all the work. The world is our oyster at this point. Go in and do what I just did. We'll rebel against the old man, and he can't take all three of us. It's our time to rule. But in the book of Genesis, it says that they refused. And if you remember, the English translations, it says they take a garment and place it on their shoulders and walk backwards, and they cover their father's nakedness. And I was like, could this be the supernatural garments from the Garden of God? And I was talking with Derek Gilbert, and he's a great researcher and author, and he has a show called A View from the Bunker. And I went on there and talked to him about it, and I made that postulation. And he got to looking up on the computer, and he said, well, Justin, you may be onto something, man. He said, in the original language, he said, and the Septuagint, He said it doesn't say a garment. He said it says the garment. He said it has a definite article assigned to it, so it's talking about a specific garment. And through the timeline, the garments were still there, and that was the sign of kingship and authority and priesthood. So if he was trying to rebel and take over as the head, it would be perfectly, like symbolically wise, to take the status symbol of kingship and authority and priesthood and use that to cover your father's nakedness and to show that, no, this is our father's position, and basically recrowning him.
Yeah, that's fascinating because it answers so many of the questions that I've got from that story, but you don't get any of this context in the Bible itself, right? In the Bible itself, it just sounds like Noah got drunk and then took it out on his family because they had the audacity to just see that he was drunk. I've also heard some way more contentious interpretations of this where the father's nakedness wasn't about sleeping with the mom, but it was about sleeping with Noah. That one is definitely a little bit more into left field. The way that you're describing it, again, makes way more sense because now it's about trying to supplant the ruler of the family, like, right, trying to take over the patriarch's status. And then his brothers giving that garment back to Noah is not only saying we're against you, but it's saying we're going to help restore the authority of our patriarch in this family, which is sort of in its own way, sort of sending him into exile, right? Because you can't really go back from doing that.
No, and it does, like you said, it answers so many questions, and you can also see it repeated throughout Scripture with Absalom and Reuben.
I gotta ask a dumb question because this is still fairly new to me. Why would Ham need to sleep with his mom to assert dominance when he could just take the garment? Wouldn't just taking the garment de facto make you a powerful ruler and you wouldn't even have to have done anything with your father's nakedness?
Well, it's because it's basically the status symbol, but at the same time, I mean, look at the example of Nimrod and Esau. Somebody could just easily come up and kill you and take it. He wanted to devise a scheme or a plot, a conspiracy, to rebel and take over, and he was hoping that his brothers would join in on him, and it would be 3 against 1, and they would just, supplant the father. But it says in the book of Jasher that, when he was exiled, he just took them anyway. He just stole them, then ran.
And remind me, how does Nimrod get his hands on these garments through this chain of custody?
Because he's in the family line of Canaan, because it gets passed down through that line now. And it says that Ham gave them to Cush, and Cush was the father of Nimrod, according to the Bible, the biblical narrative. And it said that he hid them back, and that Nimrod was the son of his old age, whom he loved exceedingly, and he gave the garments to. And I think you see them again in the Bible one other time, and that's with Joseph. And it's the same exact verbiage used as Cush giving it to Nimrod. Because if you remember that story, it say of Joseph? It says Joseph was the child of Jacob's old age, and whom he loved exceedingly. And he gave him a coat of many colors. And once again, going back to Ezekiel 28, beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper, that is a multicolored garment covered in gold inlays.
It sounds like the Technicolor dream coat, right? From, wasn't that one of the plays? Was that Jesus Superstar? Or it was one of those around that time period.
And what's crazy too is you can find that story being confirmed through archaeology. I had on the show a few months ago, give me a second, brain fart. David Roll. I had David Roll on the show, and he was in that major film series, the Exodus series. And he is a Egyptologist and historian, and what he's famous for, he's kind of like Graham Hancock. He turned archaeology on its head when he come up with a new Egyptian kings list in chronology. And they all said he was a pseudoscientist, he was a quack, and done him the same way everybody's doing Graham Hancock now. But when I talked to him, he was talking about this ancient Semite city that they had found in Egypt called Avaris. And he said that in Avaris, they found this, what do you call it, like a high official's house in the center. And that it was this huge house, and there was actually a pyramid tomb in the back. And when they dug it up, they went inside, and it was an empty tomb. But they found fragments of something just scattered all over the floor. And they started putting these fragments back together. And once they did, they realized it was like a statue of a person. But the person had yellow painted skin. And he said, that's not an Egyptian thing. Egyptians always painted themselves brown. They were dark-skinned people. He said, but the Semites, the Jewish people, if you want to call them, they depicted their people with yellow skin. And he said, so this was a Semite. He said, you can call it a Hebrew, you can call it a Jew, that these are, what the archaeology community, that's what they labeled these people as, Semites. He said, and as they got to putting it together, he said, not only did it have yellow skin, it had flame red hair. He said, that's not an Egyptian thing either. That's a Semite thing. And it goes back to Esau, covered in red hair. And he said that, and on his shoulder was draped a coat of many colors. So he said that they believe they found the tomb of Joseph, who was sold to slavery, went down to Egypt, become a high official, and saved the known world from famine. And he said, and the biblical narrative supports it. He said because the tomb was empty because it says that in Moses' going out, they gathered up the bones of Joseph and took it with them when they were in their wilderness wanderings. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
So I've got your context now on how important this garment was, so that when Esau comes back and he trades his birthright, I'm curious, does his birthright include this garment that his brother Jacob doesn't even know about? Or is this different? Is this like saying, yeah, take everything the dad was about to leave me, knowing that he's got something even more important kind of stashed away?
Yes, 100%. Now, because when he traded the birthright, that was, the land titles, the symbol, the status symbol of the firstborn son. So he had the garments hidden away. And when you get to the part where Isaac blesses them, and this is another one of those passages that's kind of confusing, where he calls in Esau and he says, my life's basically dwindling away. I want to taste your game one more time. Go hunt and prepare me a delicious meal, and I'll give you your blessing. And he goes to take off. And in that story, it says that Rebekah's standing by the door and hears this. So she goes, tells Jacob, go out, kill one of the kids of the goats, and I will prepare a delicious meal. And you go in to your blind father and tell him that you are Esau, and go steal the blessing. And the first thing he says is, no, mother. He said, I am a smooth man. He said, if my father sees that I am tricking him, he will give me a cursing instead of a blessing. And she says, do as I tell you, and if he gives out a cursing, let the cursing fall on my head. just do as I say. And it says that he goes out, gets the goat, kills it, brings it in. His mother prepares the meal, but then they take the goat skin and wrap it around Jacob. So Esau's hair is not poetic language or hyperbole. He was literally Sasquatch hairy. And if anybody's not felt of a goat's fur, it's thick, it's oily, it's coarse. I mean, this is, Sasquatch style coverings. And he had to literally put this on. That way, when his father reached out to touch him, he felt how hairy it was and thought it was his son, Esau. But there's a little nugget in there that's kind of hidden away if you don't have this supernatural garments from the Garden of Eden and the Birthright, glasses on. You'll miss it. It says as a final touch that Rebekah goes to the house of Esau and takes a special garment and places it on Jacob as like the cherry on top. So Rebekah knew about the garments.
Did Esau just not hide it very well, or was she like spying on him? Or I guess that part's up to the speculation.
Yeah, that we just don't know. But it says that she goes and takes one of Esau's special garments and places it on Jacob as the final piece. And then when he goes into the room, he feels of him, and he's like, I hear the voice of my son Jacob, but I feel my son Esau. And then he makes a comment. He says, but you even smell of the field, my son.
That skunk ape. Yeah, and if you've ever smelled a goat, they've got a very musky smell. You can smell from almost like a mile away.
Yeah, and you get the phantom smells with the encounters of Sasquatch too. I find that interesting.
Yeah, and I guess also not to bury the lead here too, but the emphasis not just on being hairy, but red hair. That's one of the things too that if you've only seen Harry and the Hendersons and a few different Bigfoot references here and there, you might not realize that one of the two most consistent characteristics of Bigfoot, aside from him being big, hence the name, but it would be that there's an odor, a very distinct odor that goes along with it, and red hair. And even in these global Bigfoot tales of Yetis and Sasquatch and Wildmans in the UK and every single country, that does seem to be one of the most consistent themes, is having red hair.
Yeah, 100%. And then even with the Native American lore, the red-haired giants, the Sitika from the Lovelock Cave legend, they were tall, red-haired, hairy giants. There's too many common themes to ignore.
So where does the hate for Esau come into all of this? Because so far, Esau kills Nimrod. He takes the garment. He comes back. He promises his birthright to Jacob. Then when Jacob goes to actually, I guess, get that birthright in a symbolic way, he dresses up and acts as if he's Esau, even gets Esau's garments from Rebekah, right? So this is Esau and Rebekah together, somewhat pulling something over on Isaac in a way, like they're lying to him, but the curse is supposed to be transferred to Rebekah. So where's Esau's crime in all of this to where he gets the hate and Jacob gets the love?
Well, one thing that really stands out that is kind of, once again, it's buried without the historical and cultural context, is that he had 2 wives at this time, and they were both Canaanite women. And as we talked about with Noah, that line was cursed. It was bred from an incestuous act in the beginning. And there were strict commandments that God's people were not to marry into these lineages. He wanted to keep them separate. And he had not one but 2 Canaanite wives that practiced, pagan idolatry. But once he's, screwed out of his birthright, I think he
Literally.
yeah, just goes into full rebellion. It's kind of like his last middle finger to the family. And it says that he goes to Ishmael, which is his uncle, and takes a wife. And if you are kind of lost, on kind of the biblical narratives, Ishmael is like a mirrored carbon copy image of Esau himself. Abraham and Sarah were advanced in age and without child, but God promised them a nation of people and sons. And Sarah, out of fear that she couldn't deliver, offers her handmaiden to breed with to Abraham, and her name was Hagar. And when you follow the story of Genesis, while they were in the land of Egypt, the Pharaoh gifted Hagar to the family as like a peace offering, or like an alliance type thing. And that was his daughter. So Hagar was of royal lineage from the Egyptians. And so Abraham laid with her, and she conceived a male child, and that was Ishmael. Well, then later on, through a miracle, and Rebekah conceives and has Isaac. And immediately, Sarah becomes jealous of Hagar and Ishmael and knows that he's the firstborn son, so he's going to get the birthright and all the titles. So in that story, she tells Abraham that they have to leave. She wants them exiled. She becomes jealous, and so they, like basically give her a huge portion of money and some animals and servants. That way they'll be comfortable, but they're basically kicked out and pushed out. That way her son, Isaac, can get the birthright. So Ishmael is the firstborn son that was screwed out of his inheritance, just like Esau. So you have this bitter spirit of resentment of being screwed coming together here. And you talk about family feuds and resentment. Can you imagine the conversations by the fire at night between these two? And when you follow the lineages from this union is where you get the birth of all your Islamic nations, your Muslims people, and all the people groups that absolutely hate God's people and want them exterminated off the face of the earth. And you see it playing out in the news today in the Middle East. You have these two people groups fighting over the land and the birthright, and one believes that they were screwed and disinherited. Nothing new is under the sun. Solomon said it best. It's the same story. It's just playing out in modern times.
You mentioned that there's a whole bunch of different religious relics. You mentioned Ark of the Covenant is one of those. I would even maybe a little bit more modern, but even the Spear of Destiny sometimes is considered one of these religious relics that actual excursions have gone out in the world in the last 100 years to go and find some of these things, right? To find the Ark of the Covenant, to find the Spear of Destiny. Have there ever been any explorations to find these garments that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would have to think that something with this great of importance would have been took care of and passed through someone's line, even if it's just a piece of it or something. It's probably, in a vault somewhere in some wealthy elite family, or in the basement of the Vatican somewhere tucked away in a box, like you see on the Indiana Jones movies and stuff.
It turned into a wallet, probably.
Yeah.
Some boots, some snakeskin boots.
Yeah, so who knows? But I would think with something with this much, status symbol, history, and importance to it, it would have been preserved and took care of and passed down.
So the hate for Esau is somewhat related to this jealousy over the birthright of who is the true heir of this meandering line, that technically it would go to Ishmael if Ishmael hadn't been screwed out of his birthright. So then it goes to Isaac, and then from Isaac, it essentially is supposed to go to Esau, but instead goes to Jacob because of this little... So
this conspiracy,
what do you make of that deal of saying, hey, you can have my birthright for this soup? Is it, I mean, you kind of explained that it's not just about the soup. It was that this dude just took down 3 Nephilim giants and Nimrod and beheaded Nimrod and probably came back home and stashed the secret garments, but he's bleeding out and he's maybe about to die. So he goes to his brother, please save me, give me nourishment, don't let me die. And the brother's kind of like, only if ... So how does Jacob kind of get away? Does he get away scot-free in all of this about lying to Isaac and swindling his brother out of his birthright because he sees that he's about to die right in front of him? How is Jacob not the bad guy in this equation?
Yeah. And part of that, the hatred for Esau, is to do with that, because with the breeding, with Ishmael and the hatred between, God's people, God's chosen people, and also his 2 Canaanite wives. If you read Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 conspiracy theory, and other people too, the wives that he took, when you follow the genealogies, they were from known giant clans. So this hairy quote-unquote man marries into Nephilim giant clans and interbreeds with them. And so if you got this hairy man breeding with giants, you got a pretty high probability of throwing some strange pups. And you got the story about the Kandahar giant and the red hair Siti Ka in America and all this stuff. So that's kind of where you get in the text where it says Esau loved, or Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, because of all the immorality that sprung from his marriages and his children. And even from this line, Amalek springs and created the tribe known as the Amalekites, and their name means the blood lickers. So this sprang from that union, and the Edomites were the sworn enemy of God's people. They attacked them. They were the first ones to attack them when they were in their wilderness wanderings and tried to take them out. When Nebuchadnezzar II rolled in and destroyed Jerusalem and took them back as slaves to Babylon, it says that the Edomites just stood back and let them in and watched Jerusalem burn to the ground and cheered as they were being led in chains to Babylon. So they are the perpetual enemy of God's people, and that's why he hates them. But as far as like Jacob, it's because, he, in our, context and viewpoint, he looks pretty crappy and, seems to get away with doing a lot of underhanded stuff. But we got to remember too that it was the will and purpose of God. He was the chosen seed from the beginning. When you go to Genesis, I think it's chapter 22 or 23, when Rebekah becomes pregnant, there's like a warning. The angel of the Lord appears to Rebekah and says, 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb, and they battle. They're at enmity with one another. And one shall be stronger than the other, but the younger shall rule over the older. And so it's like the angel gave this prophecy from God and pretty much told her, this is how it's to be, and you're to do everything in your power to make sure that it happens.
And that's why she says, you can put this curse on me, because she was already told that the will of God was to let the younger Jacob take over for Esau.
Yeah, and I don't want to give it away in the book, but there's so much deep dive stuff in here. I go into the history of the wild man, the lineages, and all this stuff that we've talked about today, but I just go super deep. But I have a theory in the book to why Esau was so different, and it all goes back to Genesis 3:15 and the seed war. The Nephilim
seed
giants
war.
and all that comes into play.
There's one other biblical story about Bigfoot that I've heard before, and I wonder if you've come across this. This is the Mormon. There was a Mormon that was traveling in the early 1800s, I believe, and he told somebody that he came across Cain in his travels, but that Cain himself was Bigfoot, and he was sort of cursed to wander the earth indefinitely, and was also described as being tall and having a body full of hair and all of this. Is this a similar, different? Is this directly related of this story? Have you heard this before?
Yeah, because that's in the book too, because I have to go through Cain and all these other guys. When you read the ancient writings of the Jews, the rabbis and a lot of this old stuff, they talk about that Cain's mark and curse was that he was covered in hair and that he was given a horn. And that's why he was so freaked out, saying, oh man, they're going to kill me, because he looks like this hairy beast, and he's afraid of being hunted and killed. And in their legends and lore, like Ginsburg I was talking about, it says that Lamech was going blind in his older age, and his son, Tubal-Cain, would go with him in the field to hunt and guide his bow. And one day on a hunt, he points his father's bow at this beast in the field, and they shoot it and kill it. And when they walk up, he realizes that it's his ancestor Cain. And that's why you get that story in the Bible. Lamech comes home and says, if Cain's curse was times 7, mine will be 70 times 7. He said, I killed a man. He said, and in my anger, I killed a youth. He killed his son for the mistake. And you even see this in the sealing of the Vatican, I think. And I'll show you this. I got a picture of it in the book. This is crazy. When you go through these stories, and then also I think you see it again with Nebuchadnezzar. If you remember the story, he's cursed to go mad and wander the wilderness as like a beast of the field. I think he's turned into what they call the wild man, what we call the Bigfoot. But after 7 years, was allowed to regain his sanity and return back and rule his kingdom. So I think that's another common theme that you see in the Bible. God's cursing is to make people these hairy beasts, which I don't have my prints in black and white. It's not color, but if you see, this is the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and right here is a cave. Well, I zoomed in and blew it up, and here's the picture. You have 2 hairy, quote-unquote, men hiding in this cave. This guy looks a lot like a Bigfoot. I say in the book that I think this is Esau. And then you look across from him is this other hairy guy leaning in. But if you look on top of his head, he's got a horn. Just as the legends of the Jews said that Cain had. So when they were painting this Sistine Chapel, I think they hid this in as like a little Easter egg.
Just like an Aronofsky film, like a Noah film. for those that are paying attention to the details. I got one other biblical Bigfoot reference that I'd like to get your take on, and that's the Hairy Mary. And I don't even know where the Hairy Mary came from, but I believe it was sometime in like the 15 and 1600s. You had these sort of medieval artists that were drawing versions of Mary covered again in red fur. And one of them, it's like head to toe, completely. Has this come up in any of your research or writings?
No, that is totally new to me.
The Hairy Mary? Oh, I'm so glad that I got to introduce you to this. This is one of the other like Bigfoot adjacent, Bible adjacent references. And I think there was 3 different versions of it. I'll pull one up just to show you. I'll describe it too for anyone that's just listening to this. But the Hairy Mary, here we've got, and actually, if you just go to here, there's an entire website dedicated to it. But here's one from an evil manuscript, and you can clearly see that she has got her. It's not just the hair on her head, but she's got hair growing out of every part of her body. Here's another version of Hairy Mary. These are all the different versions. So we've got one where she's up in the sky, surrounded by angels hovering, covered in hair. And then you've got this one, which is the red-haired Hairy Mary, again surrounded by angels, but covered head to toe with this hair.
That is wild.
I wish I had
what are they
more
saying about it
to give you. I've heard that some of the examples are almost that she's like radiating, so it might be almost the same way that if someone's wearing a crown, you can see it radiating with all these lines in all directions, that it could be a nod to that. Although, again, that makes about as much sense as you walked in on your dad drunk and now you're cursed forever. There's a lot of missing points to this. And as far as I'm aware, there's no biblical, at least in the King James version or like a Bible you would go and get mainstream, that describes as Hairy Mary. It specifically comes out of these medieval paintings.
Yeah, that strikes me as like some kind of like esoteric elbow rub to the few that know. You know what I mean? Like it's like an occult, like secret thing that only a handful of people know, and
someone's got to know,
an inside joke.
Here's another one, again covered head to toe in this like curly red hair, not black, not brown, red hair. This blows my mind. This entire premise. Here's another version of that. Again, with this one looks more like she's wearing a suit that's covered in hair, but again, it's the same motif over and over again. Here's another one. This one makes it look like it's the hair on her head that's covering the rest of her body. Here's another one. There are so many. It was definitely a motif that not just one artist decided to take some some liberties with it. It seems like they were all conveying this same message that's completely lost on me. I think it's novel and it's fun whenever Bible and Bigfoot comes up.
Yeah, that's something that I think you just might have sent me down another rabbit
book
trail,
number
man.
2, my friend. Well, you mentioned you go way more into depth in your book, the Epic of Esau. Give me just an elevator pitch for someone that's like they've listened this far, they're interested enough, but they got to get off the fence. Like, what else do you have in this book that'll knock someone's socks off?
Well, I guess I can read the back of it because I summarized it pretty good in the back, and then
please.
A quote from Dr. Joy Pugh. She gave me a really good forward, man, and she had some really good words to say about it. I was really flattered. But the back of the book, it says, Esau is one of the most enigmatic characters in the Bible. His birth alone is strange to say the least. He came out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. What if I told you there's much more to this guy's story, but has been lost to us throughout the ages? That his story is scattered in pieces throughout other ancient extra-biblical books. This is a story of what we would call today a Bigfoot. This story goes back to the Garden of Eden, a serpent, supernatural garments, and a birthright. This tale reveals the connections to the Nephilim giants and his genealogy's role in the end times. Welcome to an epic journey. This is the Epic of Esau. And Dr. Joey Pugh, I put a piece of her quote in the front of the book, and it says, "The Epic of Esau is much more than a mere book. It's a challenging new vision." So it's like, I have developed, this is not something that I copy and pasted a bunch of Wikipedia. This is not regurgitated information. I promise you, you've never heard the story of this man like I have delivered it to you. And you're not going to find a more researched and well-researched book on the subject. I'm a obsessive compulsive type guy. For 2 years, this subject has been my obsession, and I have read through, like I said, the 9-book series of Louis Ginsburg's Legends of the Jews. I've read all the legends and lore and mythology behind the Jewish people. I've read the Midrashes, the Targums, the Rabbi Rashi, all their writings, and tried my best to piece together and take all these little pieces of this guy and put it together in a good flowing story, and it parallels perfectly with the biblical narrative and fills in so many gaps and ambiguous things that's in your Bible. I think that you can read this right alongside the Bible, and it complements it perfectly. And I have theories and postulations in the book, but I come right out and I tell you, hey, this is my theory, this is my postulation, and here is the scriptures to why I believe that, and this is my interpretation. So when I'm talking about stuff, I don't just say, oh, in the book of Genesis it said this, this, and this, so I believe this. No, I say Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, here it is, boom, I put the quote in there, and then underneath it I say, okay, it said this, you read it for yourself. Now if you go here, look here, and this is so I tie everything with good red string, like your conspiracy board back there. I have all the pictures pinned up with red string connecting dots all over the place. So it's a real good thorough read with scripture to back it up. A lot of crazy theories in there, you know what I mean, but it's in good company with scripture. So if you're comfortable in your theology and you think you've got it all figured out, this book's probably not for you. But if you got more questions and you got answers and you're willing to sit down and get a good mind stretch and possibly open to learning some new things, I think you're going to really enjoy the book.
I love this kind of research too, where you are very candid about, okay, now here I am, the writer, coming up with some theories and postulations on what all this means, and then okay, now let's get back into what all of the research actually says. And anyone listening to this show, and or even if you were watching it, you can tell that this is not a deck of slides that you're just reading off of. This stuff inside and out, which makes it so fun to talk to you about this stuff. And I mean, really, the cherry on top was getting one extra, perhaps the most rational explanation for the curse of Ham that I've heard to this date. So I really thank you for that. Hey, before we start winding this down, I warned you that I've got a little segment that I play towards the end of these interviews. So I'm going to play, it's a little 10-second clip, and then I'll explain how this works. So are you ready for this?
Yeah, let's go.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
All right, the whole point of this is just to get an easy read from where you're at on different conspiracy theories. We're going to start with Bigfoot, and then we'll get into things completely unrelated to Bigfoot. But basically, I'm going to say, how much do you believe in Bigfoot? But I want you to just give me a number from 1 to 10. And you don't have to justify it too much. But if I say, and I realize now after we talked for the last hour and a half, that just saying, do you believe in Bigfoot is a very charged term, because it's like, or are we talking about Esau Bigfoot? Are we talking about Nephilim? So I guess you can interpret it any way you want, but usually when I ask someone, do you believe in Bigfoot? It kind of is like, if you're going hunting, if your friends are like, hey, let's go hunting for Bigfoot in Tennessee, and you're going to try and see if you can find him in a cave. How much do you believe in that Bigfoot? That if you had, infinite resources, infinite time, that you could go and find him somewhere in North America?
10. You could find him. I don't know if you could shoot him and physically drag a body back, but I think you could find him.
Okay. How about, and then I said they're not all going to be related to Bigfoot. How about just magic? Magic in general, however you want to interpret that, but I mean like an objective form of magic that you don't have to convince yourself that it worked, that it objectively works, even against someone that doesn't even believe in it. How much do you believe in that type of magic from 1 to 10?
10.
How about the concept of time travel?
3.
This one, I'm really interested on your answer on this one, because you're so well studied in like rabbinical texts and stuff. What about gematria, in that deriving numbers from text, and those numbers meaning something separate from or even in addition to the text? Like, how legitimate do you think gematria is?
I think gematria is a 10, but I think it's a very overplayed card. There is, I think, instances where the writers used it to convey some messaging and stuff, but it's not some kind of, secret code that you can use to get a whole new message out of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I don't believe that.
Outstanding. I like the qualification there. Okay. How about dinosaurs, 1 to 10?
10. And mankind walked with them.
How about dragons?
10.
And even if we have to specify fire breathing and flying dragons, is it still a 10?
Yeah.
How about shape shifting reptilians?
I would say a 5. I'm in the middle.
Okay, that's fair. Five is like you could be swayed either way. What about little gray aliens, like the extraterrestrial ET kind of style?
I would say 7, 8.
How about flat Earth?
0.
Spherical Earth, round Earth. Yeah, don't know. I'm not gonna throw anything at you. Don't gotta worry about me. You gotta worry about the comments.
Oh yeah. Spherical Earth, as far as I know, a 10.
How about the concept of Tartaria?
Tartaria, I would say 4. I'm doubtful, but I'm not. I guess I'm not high enough to. I mean, I'll just say 5. I'm open to hear something, but
okay,
it's fairly low.
How about 9/11 was an inside job?
10.
How about Oklahoma City was an inside job?
10.
How about the idea that Bin Laden was buried at sea out of respect to his culture?
0.
How about Epstein killed himself?
0.
How about Elon Musk is a Nazi?
0.
What about the biblical concept of demons? Do you think
10.
there's actual demons? You say 10?
Yeah, 10.
Are you at the same with angels?
Yeah.
Oh, celebrity clones.
Probably 3.
All right, and then last one here, and I guess it's kind of related to angels and demons, but more specific, that AI is some way that you could interface with other entities. I guess that could be an angel or a demon or an alien, but that AI is like a medium to communicate with these.
Yeah, I would say probably a 8 or 9. I think that is a vehicle that a disembodied spirit of a Nephilim could easily hijack.
All right, I'm going to slip another 1 or 2 in here. I'm going to slip 2 more, and then we'll wrap this up. and pay attention because there's some qualifiers on this one, and then I'll ask another version of this one. But the first one is: a human being has stepped foot on the moon in the last 100 years.
2, 3.
And then what do you believe, 1 to 10, that the footage that we were shown, I guess I mean like our parents or grandparents, but the Apollo 11 mission, that footage was shot by Stanley Kubrick specifically?
I'd say probably 6 or 7.
You and me are very aligned on a lot of these answers, man. I'm actually somewhat fascinated by that.
As far as like conspiracy goes, I mean, I'm open to a lot of it, but I guess to a lot of the extremists, I'm pretty vanilla with them.
I mean, they think that, but then you're like, now pull up a chair and let's talk about Esau for a couple hours, and then you're gonna blow some minds. So, I absolutely am, honored that you came on and described all of this stuff. I got a whole bunch of new information out of this. I can't thank you enough for dropping all this knowledge on me and my audience. So tell people one more time where they can go and get your book, where they can follow you, the podcast that you're on. Like, just do all your plugs again.
Hey, man, and I appreciate you having me. I've had a really good time hanging out with you and stuff, and definitely want to have you over to my house and have you tear apart some subjects and reveal some of your knowledge nuggets to my listeners, man. But the podcast is Prometheus Lens Podcast. I've kind of coined it as the hero's journey, and that light in the background there, it's a play on Plato's allegory of the cave. And so I ask people, are you ready to leave the cave and step out onto the hero's journey? Whether we realize it or not, we are all on this hero's journey for truth. And we have to go into the unknown. We have to slay the dragon, rescue the damsel, hoard up a lot of treasure on the way, man. But you come out on the other end as a hero. And the Greek mythologies have this boon, this prize of great wealth. Once you complete your task, your journey's not over. Just like the allegory of the cave, you have to go back and share this knowledge with the world and get other people started on their hero's journey.
I have one important question about this cave. Does it come with air conditioning? Is the cave air conditioned?
No.
Does it?
That's why you got to leave.
Okay. All right. All right.
It's smoky and it's hot.
Okay.
But yeah, so anywhere you guys can consume content, you can find me there. All the social medias, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all those fine establishments, man. Just search up Prometheus Lens Podcast and you can find me there. And the book, it is on Amazon. It's $10 for the ebook and 20 for the paperback. And yeah, man. As far as like the podcast, goes, I offer subscriptions and stuff like that. $5 a month gets you ad-free listening, 48-hour early access, and once a month I do a Q&A with authors and researchers and speakers, which is really cool. So we all get together just like me and you are right now, doing face-to-face video chat with your favorite authors and researchers every single month. I've had Gary Wayne and Micah Turnbow, Dr. Judd Burton, just all kinds of really great minds in this space, and you get to sit down and conversate with them and ask them your questions, man. And as far as like February, this month, at the end of this month, we're actually having L.A. Marzulli. So if you guys see this within the month of February, I don't know when this is going to air, but you can join us and hang out and ask your questions to L.A. Marzulli if that sounds appealing to you.
That sounds awesome, man. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And I guess parting words is, if you walk in on your dad naked, don't bang your mom, and also don't trade your birthright for a bowl of soup. Two very important lessons to take from the Bible.
Solid advice.
American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all the land and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret secret societies. All of these and more on our sticker sheets.
Explore the unique with Paranoid American sticker sheets. Unearth tales of cryptids, cults, and mysteries through each sticker. These won't last long. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
We're all American stickers. Cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies. All of that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers. They'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies. All of these and more on our sticker sheets.
What the heck are you waiting for? Discover the extraordinary with Paranoid American sticker sheets. From cryptids in the night to cults out of sight, each sticker is a unique find. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.